Penguin Random House Audio presents Café Europa Revisited, How to Survive Post-Communism by Slavenka Drakulic. Read for you by Kathleen Gati. For my daughter Rujana, with love and gratitude. History without memory is impossible, but memory without history is dangerous. Timothy Snyder, historian. It takes 6 months to replace a political system, 6 years to transform an economic system, and 60 years to change a society. Ralph Dahrendorf, sociologist. Introduction. No changes were foreseen. I wrote my book Café Europa in 1996. Back then, I tried to illustrate the new Europe emerging after the entire communist bloc collapsed. Suddenly and completely unexpectedly in 1989, a historical earthquake that left us Eastern Europeans in shock, followed by euphoria and childish expectations. Not a patient people, we expected too much too soon. Europe is not a mother who owes something to her long-neglected children. Neither is she a princess one has to court. Most likely, Europe is what we, countries, peoples, individuals, make of it for ourselves. I wrote apropos these expectations. On the 30th anniversary of the collapse, I revisit Café Europa to glance inside to see how the former communist world looks now. What are the important marks of the time, and could we have anticipated them? Traveling around, I wonder, do I have any right to write us and group together all the former Eastern Bloc countries just when they insist on the differences between them? Are there in fact any of us left? And finally, is 30 years a long or a short time when it comes to profound changes in a society? Let us stick to the metaphor of a cafe. Like in any cafe, the first thing you feel when you enter it is the atmosphere. Atmosphere is, of course, immaterial, only a feeling of the place. 30, 20, even 10 years ago, you would have sensed excitement, hope, good vibrations in the air. The cafe, or rather kavana, kavarna, kaviahas, kaviarna, as this unique Central European institution is called in different languages, used to look a bit shabby. The lights were dimmed, many people smoked, but they had loud voices and smiling faces. The glasses clanged, and you could tell that there was a kind of party going on. Nowadays, as soon as you open the door, the first thing you would notice is that there is new furniture, modern appliances, a lot of light. The coffee is espresso now, and nobody reads old-fashioned newspapers any longer. The cafe looks designed, more like a bar than an old-fashioned kavana. The people look smarter than before, too. They are certainly better dressed, but there's less noise. Yet a trained eye can distinguish different groups and different tones, even polite disagreements. Many of the visitors, especially if they are older, complain about the corrupt elites, unfulfilled promises, loss of national identity, and loss of job security, as well as the stripping away of illusions. This is how you can recognize that they are Eastern Europeans. Young ones are the same everywhere. They move around in order to get a job and worry mostly about money. The Westerners in the cafe also had expectations. They believed that once the political and economic system had changed, the post-communist countries would develop fast, and the gap within a reunited Europe would soon close. When you look around, you can recognize them by the disappointment on their faces. Sitting there a while, you come to understand that what connects people in post-1989 Europe is common values, while what continues to divide them is different histories. Only time alone could ever bridge this gap, and 30 years are but a blink. If someone had told me 50 years ago that I would see communism collapse in my lifetime, I would have probably laughed, albeit bitterly. Living in Eastern Europe, though not in a country within the Soviet bloc, but in the former Yugoslavia, my generation could imagine only more of the same, or worse. Back then, George Orwell's anti-utopian novel 1984 was a book we admired because we recognized the newspeak, control and censorship that he described. We had already surpassed his Animal Farm, in which we are all equal, but some are more equal than others, as well as the reversal of such values as truth and peace. Seeing the student protests in Paris in May 1968 and the Soviet tanks rolling into Prague in August the same year could only reinforce the differences between political systems and our feeling of hopelessness. No change for the better was foreseen. Still, since 1989, Europe has changed for the better. Germany is reunified, the transition to democracy has begun in the former communist states, borders have been abolished, freedom and human rights have arrived, along with supermarkets full of goods that Eastern Europeans had never seen before. Some former communist states, like Poland and Hungary, became members of the EU sooner, some, like Bulgaria and Romania, later. Croatia was the last to join it in 2013, and some are still waiting. Many call it returning to Europe. For the first time there was the hope of a better life, and, understandably, no change for the worse was foreseen. The first crack in the perhaps too rosy picture of European unity appeared with the financial crisis of 2008. By 2015, right-wing parties had appeared on the horizon in elections in Denmark, the Netherlands, Italy, and Finland. Suddenly, there was a lot of public discussion of an almost forgotten topic: national identity and the loss of it. It soon became clear that the combination of globalization and the financial crisis had produced a general feeling of anxiety. But the decisive event in the last 30 years came from outside Europe and divided it even more deeply in terms of the reactions to it and political changes that ensued. This was the great and sudden wave of refugees between 2015 and 2016 that swept the continent, the so-called European refugee crisis. If someone had told me 30 years ago that the European Union would experience another crisis, this time through mass immigration from outside the EU that would almost bring it to the brink of collapse, once again, I would have laughed. We had already survived one major change in 1989. Was another to follow? Within a period of about a year, over 2 million refugees from Asia and Africa came to Europe via the Mediterranean Sea and across the border between Turkey and Greece on the Balkan route. After the initial welcome, EU member states changed tactics, and some of them, Bulgaria, Hungary, Slovenia, erected razor-wire border fences in Eastern Europe. Not only did Europe close its doors by limiting the number of refugees admitted, it turned out that there was no will even to deal with those already inside. The situation became worse after terrorist attacks in France and Belgium committed by citizens of immigrant parentage occurred. In the course of about 2 years, the media, and especially the populist rhetoric of right-wing party leaders like Marine Le Pen, equated refugees with Muslims, potential rapists, and terrorists. In the meantime, an already existing anxiety turned into fear of real and imagined dangers. Many differences between Western and Eastern Europe that had existed before, but were not spoken about in the interests of unity, resurfaced to play a decisive role. Citizens of the former communist countries, who felt that they had been treated as second-class citizens ever since 1989, finally took the opportunity to oppose what they called the dictatorship of the EU. Poland and Hungary, for example, became self-confident enough to refuse to take any refugees at all. With Moscow no longer issuing orders to these countries, they seemed to be less and less in the mood to take commands from Brussels. On February 11th, 2018, the day after Viktor Orban's sweeping electoral victory in Hungary,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?